Good morning from the West Coast of the United States. Welcome to Good Thinking, the live show where we show up almost every Monday, 9 a.m. Pacific time here in the West Coast of the United States, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, if you're checking from any location, where we get together with good thinkers from around the world, which is the best part of this show. You are the best part of this show, to spend a little bit of time, to steal a little bit of time away from all the time we spend on what to think. This is what we should be thinking, to give ourselves a little bit of time for improving how to think. Let me know who you are and where you're from. And we'll bring in all your comments in the chat, and we'll have a very involved conversation with good thinkers from around the world. This is where I am from. This is the Portland, Oregon. This is the downtown, and that's Mount Hood. Actually, this is very, very close to where I actually live. Although this is a green screen of Portland, this is very close from where I live. Jennifer is here from MV, which I happen to know is Multnomah Village. Also in Portland. Welcome, Jennifer, to Good Thinking Live. Who else is here? Do we have any other good thinkers yet? All right, we're going to get right into it. And I'll bring people in, as they say. So let's get a lot of participation. There are a lot of laws that are not laws. I mean, there are human-made laws, and there are laws of nature, and then there are these kind of nebulous laws. And one of them, for example, is the Peter Principle. You say that's a principle, that's a law. Workers rise to the level of their incompetence. Okay, what other laws that really aren't laws can you come up with? Can you think of any? There's some other ones that I'll tell you, but I want to see what laws can you come up with Michael Levinson from Las Vegas. Yes. And this is the best day ever. Jancy Matthews from good old Ventura, California, up and down the West Coast. And we have got Michael from Chesapeake, Virginia. We've got a lot of Americans today. That's not very usual. Usually we're full of internationals, but this is great. Let's bring it on. Let me know who's here and where you're from. What about Murphy's Law? If something can go wrong, it will. All right, Murphy's Law. Murphy's Law. Jennifer nailed it. Murphy's Law. If something can go wrong, it will. And Toronto is here in the house. Michael Morovich is here in the house. So we have got our first international Canadian on the Good Thinking show this morning. All right, Murphy's Law. What about Moore's Law? Everyone talks about Moore's Law. The number of transistors on a microchip doubles every 2 years, though the cost of computers is halved. Is that a law? Is that a law? Is that a law? Yes or no? Do you think Moore's Law is a law? Do you think Murphy's Law is a law? Do you think the Peter Principle is an actual law? No, these are observations that tell a story, that help us make sense of things that are likely to some of them are likely to be true. All right. What about, have any of you heard of Stigler's Principle? Stigler's Principle. Does anyone know? You could Google it really quickly. Does anyone know what Stigler's Principle is? It's called the law of eponymy. That's a law about giving names to things. All right. Stigler's Principle was proposed by the University of Chicago professor Steven Stigler, and it states that no scientific discovery is named after its original discoverer, meaning a lot of people get credit for things. Some of his examples of what he talks about are the Hubble's law, which was actually derived by someone else 2 years before Edwin Hubble, that galaxies are moving away from the Earth at speeds proportional to their distance. In other words, the farther they are, the faster they're moving away from Earth. But it's called Hubble's law. But this other guy, Georges Lemaitre, was the one that really technically discovered it. The Pythagorean theorem was known to Babylonian mathematicians before Pythagoras. So these are laws. Halley's Comet was actually observed since 240 BCE. So that's kind of interesting. There's a lot of these things that we know as, so that's Stigler's law, where it's like if you invent something, how many of you have come up with an idea or an invention that ended up becoming someone else's idea or invention? Let me know, yes or no. I've come up with an invention. I haven't, that became someone else's invention. Can you think about it? All right, we've got some more good thinkers in the house. I want to greet Stephen. Let's see. Stephen says, greetings from the city with the most pinball machines in the United States. What? We have a pinball machine downstairs, and Muhammad Ali pinball machine. Yes, I didn't know that. And then Michael says, laws of nature. Laws of nature are laws. I mean, until maybe they are disproven through the scientific method of constantly challenging and poking and challenging and poking and trying to disprove, because that's the whole point of the scientific method. But excellent point. All right. So today I'm wearing these earrings were printed by a 3D printer. Whether you think they're ugly or not, that's just, I think they're cool because they were printed by a 3D printer, and they're in my favorite color, orange. And if you had told me 20 years ago that you could print earrings, maybe 20 years, maybe 30 years ago, I would have thought, you're crazy. Now it's like you can have these things done, whatever. All right, so the law we're talking about today, and the reason I'm saying that it's not really a law, so you don't want to glom onto it like, oh my gosh, if I don't adhere to this, I'm breaking the law. Ridiculous, is Parkinson's law. And when you first hear Parkinson's, a lot of people think about the tragic disease, Parkinson's disease, different guy, different thing. But this is a fundamental, it's kind of a law of bureaucracy. And this suggests that work expands to the time allowed for it. So essentially, if you give yourself a month to do something, the work will expand to take a month. Whereas if you give yourself a week to do the same thing, you'd finish it in a week. Now, obviously, you can think of crazy exceptions to that. It's not very difficult. But it reminds me of my first job out of college was in a management training program for a big department store here in the United States. And I was a sales manager, and there were a lot of different department managers that reported to me. And I went to ask this one woman, I was in the deep South, Macon, Georgia. This West Coast girl went to Macon, Georgia. And I asked Nell, who had been in the handbag department, the purse department for 30 years. And I asked all of the different department managers, tell me one thing that you learned in your X number of years that would be surprising to someone new, because I was new. And Nell told me, she had worked in the handbag department, I think 30 years. She told me, the bigger the handbag, the more crap you find to put in it. And I thought, okay. And so as I have been thinking about decision-making and working on the courses for LinkedIn learning and working on my workshops and thinking about Parkinson's law, I realized that Nell described Parkinson's law. The bigger the handbag, the more crap you find to put in it. And so according to Parkinson's law, projects that you have will expand in two ways. Number one, the time it takes to complete. And number two, the perceived importance you give it. And that is the second one. So if you have a project, like you're going to write a book in the next year, that becomes more important than if you're going to write that same book in 6 months or in a week. The level of importance seems to go up with the amount of time you give your project. All right. Who can think of a project that they have like that right now? Just say what it is. Like it could be, oh, I really need to clean my house, or I really need to weed my yard, or I want to write this book, or I have this blog post, or I want to launch a website, or I have something to create, a painting to paint. How many of you, just put it in the chat. I'm so curious to hear if you have something, a project that is on the horizon. And if you do, share it in the chat. If you're live, share it in the chat after. If you're coming in not live, and tell me, share with everyone, share with all the good thinkers how long you think it would take. So, I've heard authors say, okay, I am going to write a book before I die, I want to write a book. All right, that's a really long time to give yourself, hopefully. Some people say, I want to write a book, or I want to launch a business in a year, or by this amount of time, I want this to happen. Does anyone have anything like that that they can put in the chat? All right. So Jennifer says, thank you. We've got one. Remodel of our deck. All right. Remodel of our deck. What time frame are you giving yourself to, and maybe you're going to do it yourself. Maybe you're going to hire people. Maybe you're going to hire people to do some of it, and you're going to do some of it yourself. There may be that you have to save money for the project. That's somewhat different. But I will tell you something about saving money that this Parkinson's principle has kind of divulged, which is, let's say you're just starting out and you think, gosh, I can't start saving. I've got so many bills. I'm starting my new job, whatever. If you just at the beginning of the month, turns out, and there's a lot of research behind this, set aside $20, by the end of the month, you might be out of money, but it's unlikely you would be out of more money than if you set aside $50. And it's the same kind of principle. It's kind of in reverse. Does that make sense? Oh, we have to wait on people. All right. So if you have to wait on people, that may be, if you've already called them, that might be a different kind of thing, because it's not a project you're going to do. It's the project that they're going to do. And if you've already called the people, if you've already said, hey, listen, here's the deposit, if you've already taken all the steps to get those people, that's a little bit different, because it's not something it's not within your control. I'm talking about projects that you have to do. Like if you haven't called the people yet and you haven't done everything you need to get the people to come, all the ways of, being a squeaky wheel and greasing the skids, that might relate. Otherwise, it's probably not a Parkinson's law project. Okay. What about Joshua? Joshua says, upgrade my certification. All right. How long are you giving yourself to upgrade your certification? And is it a week, a month, a year? Joshua, put it in the chat, because I want to see if you give yourself a specific time to upgrade your certification, what are you doing to start it? And that speaks to what you can do to kind of overcome or manipulate Parkinson's law to be more productive. I'm going to give you some twists on Parkinson's law. So they're like corollaries. There's one called the Stock-Sanford corollary. And it says, if you wait until the last minute, it only takes a minute to do. Obviously, you can think of a lot of things, but if you wait until the last minute, it will only take a minute to do. That's kind of true. Here's another twist. Work contracts to fit the time we give it. So if you give it a long time, it expands. But if you give it a short time, you're contracting the work. You can contract the work. It's kind of a different twist. Or here's another. In 10 hours a day, you have time to fall twice as far behind your commitments as you do in 5 hours a day. What do you think about that? True? Not true? Come on, rubber chickens. You're coming out for the participation. Rubber chickens. Here's a tech twist. Data expands to fill the space available for storage. Again, is it a law? No, these are kind of fundamental truths that you can think about and play with and challenge the assumptions. What about this one? The amount of time that one has to perform a task is the amount of time it will take to complete the task. The law also makes clear, this Parkinson's law, okay, start my application and do a course in a month, all right? Start my application and do a course in a month. Okay, what about if you broke this down into multiple projects? So I'm going to give myself 1 hour to complete my application. 1 hour to complete my application. Or by the end of today, by the end of midnight today, my application will be done. Done. And then how long will the course take? Well, obviously, if you have to sit through 20 hours of course, it doesn't take a month. It takes 20 hours. So can you take that month and cut it down to 15 days? Do you think it's possible? Joshua, you think it's possible? That's a great example. That's a perfect example. When you're hiring someone else, it's a little harder. In fairness. That's a perfect example. The law also makes clear that managers do not promote individuals who they feel might threaten their own position or minimize their own claim to achievement. So management can have a tendency to shun subordinate success, and this feeds on kind of mediocre work. So in a bureaucracy, a leader may not want to hire just one worker because they might compete with the leader. So maybe a leader will hire more people so that they compete with each other. And that's another form of a growing bureaucracy, is putting more people toward a project. You think maybe that will make the project take a shorter amount of time? Not if you don't give yourself a shorter amount of time. All right. Who can guess what intelligence is without looking it up? Who can guess? The best guess gets all the rubber chickens today. There's a whole bunch of them. Gets not just all the rubber chickens, but we'll get a shower of rubber chickens in your honor. Who can guess what intelligence is? Got to put your answers in the chat. Intelligence, anyone? All right. Once you get that, I'm going to give you a minute because I want to be able to give out a shower of rubber chickens today. How many of you have had an assignment like a college paper or report at work or packing to move where you waited till the last minute to do it? Anyone? Okay, me. I have many times and I still do. But when I think of Parkinson's law, one of the things that it helps me do is to see if I can, number one, half the time. So right now I have a course to write for LinkedIn Learning. I've got 2 courses coming out in 2021, 2 courses coming out in 2021, and we're shooting them at the end of April. So I have these courses to write and I'm like, oh, whatever. So I'm going to take half the time that I have given myself, which is I've given myself 2 weeks. I'm going to get this course done in 1 week. And I'm making a public voluntary commitment so that next Monday when I'm here, you can ask me, did you get the course done? Ah, that's scary. So if no one is here next week, good, because you won't remember to ask me. But if anyone dares to show up next week to ask me, I better have that course done. And even if I have it done and it's not ready to be, it's not perfect, that's a clue. But I have it done. I have all the scripts written. I can go back and fix them, but they're just written. Then it counts and I can take credit next week. All right, Stephen, let's see what he says. He says, his guess is intelligence is not gelatinous. That's awesome. All right, let me tell you what intelligence is. Intelligence is kind of a fusion of incompetence and jealousy. Incompetence and jealousy. Now, I want to warn you, it's easy to see other people who criticize you as having intelligence. But you have to be honest, because even people who have intelligence or are intelligent could have some good feedback for you. So you got to be careful to dismiss. But this is, it really is the antithesis of growth and productivity and profitability. And it turns out that this incompetence jealousy factor does somehow relate and contribute to Parkinson's law. Can you figure out how? Can anyone think? Because this is about how to think. So I don't want to tell you, okay, this is how you think. This is how you think about it. How can intelligence relate to Parkinson's law, especially in a big company or in a bureaucracy? All right, think about that. Now we're going to go into, because we have to get into it, how do you overcome Parkinson's law? We kind of hinted at some of the things. First of all, what is procrastination? Do you think procrastination is laziness or bad judgment? Which do you think it is? Put it in the chat. Put it in the chat, whichever side the chat is on in your screen. Put it in the chat. Is procrastination laziness or bad judgment? Which one? Put it in the chat. Meanwhile, since Stephen is the only one that tried to answer intelligence, he gets all the rainfall of rubber chickens. Yay, Stephen! Rubber chickens. Okay. He's like, I don't care about rubber chickens. I care about rubber chickens, but he doesn't care about rubber chickens. All right. So laziness or bad judgment? Procrastination, it turns out, bad judgment. Susume says bad judgment. And it turns out that the evidence supports Susume's claim. It is Totally true. Let's see what Greg says. I usually think it's fear. Is fear laziness or bad judgment? Laziness or bad judgment? I think you might be right, because I think fear is sometimes bad judgment more than laziness. Oh, fear can be good judgment too. There's some things you should be fearful of, but maybe it's bad judgment fear. And Steven says bad judgment. Okay, he does care about the rubber chickens. I knew you cared. Fantastic. All right, so we're back to bad judgment. Procrastination is a way to cope with challenging emotions and negative moods induced by certain tasks. Boredom, anxiety, frustration, resentment, self-doubt. What are some other things? What makes a task procrastination worthy? Put it in the chat. Joshua says a bit of both. And I think but is laziness, where does laziness come from? Is it your fault that you're lazy? Who gave you, what neuron made you lazy? Maybe it's a bit of both. Who can tell, who wants to put in the chat the things that make a task procrastination worthy? Boring. Got that. Sometimes difficult tasks are procrastination worthy. Okay, so Susume says it's a combination of unstructured thoughts overall. Unstructured thoughts. Actually, structuring your thoughts is the first step toward good judgment. So you get some rubber chickens, because that one's really good. Susume gets rubber chickens. Aha. All right. So, okay. Michael says male DNA. Procrastination. No, Michael, that's multitasking. That's a lack of being able to multitask, I thought. I'm not going to accuse men of being bigger procrastinators. That's what you're implying. Except for when it's convenient, that I might. All right. So there's a lot of things. We'll keep looking at what you put as possibilities for procrastination worthy, but let's get to how you overcome it. Let's really leave today with some new ways of thinking about Parkinson's law. Number one of the things you can do is you write down on a piece of paper. You can use a screen, but there's some pen and paper studies that might mean that you should take out the old pen and paper. I know it's not environmentally correct to use paper, but try it and write down exactly what you're trying to accomplish. Like maybe you say, okay, I'm going to launch a YouTube channel, or I'm going to write a blog post, or I'm going to write a book, or I'm going to create a website, or I'm going to paint a picture, or write a song, or whatever. And that's going to take me a month. Now, why is that going to take you a month? Maybe because you've never done it before, or maybe you researched it and found that's really what it usually takes on average. What you can do with that is just right off the bat is write down what you're going to do, and then just say, okay, write down how long it's going to take. And don't cheat and double the time because you're going to then cut it in half. It's because you're going to cut that time in half. So let's say I'm going to publish a new blog or a new website, or let's say I'm going to write a LinkedIn learning course, and it's going to take me 2 weeks to write it because I've got a lot of other things going on. All true. It's not my only thing I have. So I've now said I'm going to chop it down and I'm going to do it in a week. Some people could say I could do it in a day. I don't know. But what I could do from that is, all right, I could break the project down further. So I could say, okay, what part of that course can I do in a day? I'm going to make a commitment that I'm going to have 3 scripts done in a day. And I might write those scripts and they may be really bad. But the most important thing to overcome procrastination is to start. It is totally true in all of the research. And the most important thing is to start. Michael asks a really good question. Can you account for interruptions that are not in your control? And that goes to Jennifer. I mean, she can't necessarily hire these people who are going to build the deck that might be giving the best price, and maybe they're not in a big hurry, and maybe they would rather wait for those people. I mean, there's plenty of people who could build a deck probably, in a day if you paid them enough money, but that might not be the objective. Michael asks a slightly different question, which is, can you account for interruptions that are outside of your control? Yes, you can account for interruptions that are outside of your control because you have had interruptions that are outside of your control. So when you take the outside view, you could say to someone, hey, how long did it take you to write a LinkedIn Learning course? And I did ask one of my fellow LinkedIn Learning instructors, one of the top LinkedIn Learning instructors who has probably more courses on the platform than anyone. And he told me he wrote a course in a weekend. I have too many things interrupting me outside of my control to do a LinkedIn Learning course in a weekend. But that did recalibrate how long I think I should take. So sometimes going to an outside view and saying, okay, you might have different interruptions. Maybe you have young kids, etc. But that doesn't prevent you from starting. Interruptions should not prevent you from starting. Here's what should not prevent you from starting. Got to check email. Got to clean out my email box. Got to fold that laundry. Ugh, I got to go dust. I find those a lot more than I'm working from the house every day. There's all these little interruptions. Okay, what does Alan say? Alan says, let's bring it in. The ultimate procrastination for me, defending my thesis in the afternoon on the last day of the last quarter of grad school. Thank God my thesis advisors were in the loop for the last 3 years. Brilliant. I cannot tell you how much of the research, you can only imagine, because a lot of this research on Parkinson's law and procrastination is done on college campuses. So much of the research actually deals with people defending their thesis, turning in their research paper, turning in a final. Oh, it is so common. And Jennifer says, sorry, I was driving to work. I play Herbie Hancock, Chameleon. All right. I don't know. Sometimes there's a delay. I don't know what she's answering, but I think, Ellen, that is a very good example. So the first thing is to just write down your tasks and goals, include breaking down big tasks into smaller tasks and set milestones, and then make those milestones have a shorter time frame. Really constrain yourself in a slightly uncomfortable way because the work will expand. Get a smaller handbag. Because if you get this big handbag, you're going to find the women. Where are the women on this show? You are going to find all kinds of things to throw in that handbag. Or if you get a bigger briefcase, you're going to find all kinds of things. Your lipstick, your this, your that. Get a smaller handbag. Get a smaller briefcase. Give yourself less time. Just start it. Research suggests that we remember uncompleted or interrupted tasks better than projects we finished. So if you started, to Michael, who asked, how do you deal with interruptions? You started. You are going to remember to get on that task more, even if you're interrupted, more than if you waited for all the interruptions to go away. So just start it. It's like listening to a catchy song, and then it all of a sudden cuts off in the middle. Turns out you're going to have an earworm for that song more than you would have if you listened to the entire song. So starting a task means that your brain will continue to process it. So just start it. Start it. If you get interrupted, you'll remember it. And another tactic is to list the costs of procrastination. And it works. This is better when you're putting off like big tasks, not little tasks. Like you don't want to take all the time to write down, okay, what are the costs if I don't fold the laundry? Because by the time you wrote that, you'd be done with the laundry. So we're not talking about little tasks. We're talking about kind of more audacious tasks or things that you're trying to get accomplished. A thesis, for example, launching a business, painting, putting your painting out there. It's also that calculating the costs of procrastination for each of these things helps you, but it really mostly the biggest thing to help you is to get the smaller purse, to cut the time in half, and then make the commitment voluntarily. So I made the commitment that I will have the course, the next critical thinking course, written before good thinking next Monday. And that stresses me out because that's a lot of work. So I'm just going to write them. And if they're not great, I'm going to remember to go back and revise. But you can ask me next week, did I finish the course? All right, we've got some new comments I don't want to miss. Let's see. Yes, break it down into little tasks, 100%. And the projects seem easier when the deadline is shorter. This is super interesting. Research indicates that the longer deadlines can lead workers to think an assignment is harder than it actually is. So if you're a leader or a manager and you are giving an assignment to your workers and you think you're helping them by giving them a longer period of time to get it done, you may rethink that assumption. You may rethink that assumption, because they will say, ooh, this must be a really important task if I'm being given a month. So instead, as a leader, break the task into shorter tasks. If you really don't need it in a month, you don't need to fool them and have them scrambling at the last minute, but break the tasks into smaller tasks and make the time frames very short for those small tasks, because you don't want them to think, oh my gosh, this is something that's so important, when you didn't even think it was important just because you gave it a longer time. That could stress and cause a lot of cognitive friction. In another study, a longer deadline led respondents to commit more money to filling out their tax returns, even though the length of the deadline came from an incidental factor, which was the arrival of the W-2 form. So those whose tax forms arrived later, and therefore they had less time to complete their taxes, committed to spending less money than their peers to get the same job done. So those who had it arrive later didn't take the time to hire tax professionals or buy tax preparation software. They just were like, oh, I'm going to get it done. So these studies will show you that setting these shorter deadlines is not a trick to, stress people out. It's really the opposite. And this is why Parkinson's law suggests that longer deadlines lead people to set easier goals, and then it decrease effort, increase stress, and longer deadlines increase an assignment's perceived difficulty. And there's so many studies that show this. All right, let's see what Alan says. After reading Jocko Willink's book, Extreme Ownership has helped to reduce my procrastination. I've heard him on a lot of podcasts. As a retired U.S. Navy SEAL commander, he epitomizes the SEAL mentality. Embrace the suck. Yes, embrace the suck. Yeah, so if it's going to suck this week for me to crank out this course, even though I have lots of interruptions all the time because I've got other things to do, I'm going to do it because I made a verbal commitment. Not a verbal, I made a public commitment to you that I'm going to get it done. Ooh. All right. So this gives you some ideas. You can reframe a boring or unpleasant task by considering a positive aspect of it. Okay, that might be, hey, what do I love about creating these courses? Sometimes I love when I'm delving into some new research or coming up with a way to make a very complex concept fun and tangible. So I kind of like that. So I'm looking forward to that. Maybe you cultivate curiosity. If you're feeling tempted to procrastinate, bring your attention to the sensations arising in your body. Like, what feelings are eliciting this temptation to procrastinate? What is this feeling? Why am I being pulled? I think I'll check email instead. I heard the dryer went off. I think I'll go fold the laundry. No, get this done. Get it started. I have 3 courses I've got to have done today, even if they stink. 3 movies, even if they stink. All right. So here's another question. Oh, we got some good. I've got to come back. Let's see. Susame says, I always create a bunny's carrot for myself before I start any work. A bunny's carrot. Is that an incentive? That's a great segue into one of the last things we're going to wrap up, which is make the things we want to do as easy as possible for ourselves. Meaning, if you want to go to the gym before work, you're not a morning person, sleep in your exercise clothes, okay? Leave your shoes right where they are. So when you get out, your gym bag is packed. Have your gym bag packed. Stick it in the car by the front door. Make the things as easy as possible. Maybe that's Susame's bunny carrot. I kind of like that. And make your temptations more inconvenient. Like, remove all the notifications that you absolutely do not need unless, or you're going to get fired. Remove all the notifications from your phone. 100% remove all the notifications from your phone. If you remove the notifications from your phone, you will be able to shrink the size of your purse by, I think it is 13%, like right off the bat. Just shrink the amount of time it takes to do something. Remove the notifications from your phone. All right. So think of Parkinson's law and all these other laws. It's not like a law. Well, I can see how that's ridiculous. These are just guidelines for thinking. And then it's fun to play with them, how to think about them. And how to think about Parkinson's law is just to understand that the time you think it will take to do important things is much longer than it really is. And you can play with it by cutting something in half. Like, try it, cutting something in half. Now, if you know that it's not real, then you have to tell people, this is what I'm going to do. I am going to write a book by the end of April. I will have a book done. Not me, but that might be you. Or I'm going to have my website done. Or I'm going to publish a song. Or I'm going to put a work of art, create a NFT, whatever. So just think of something that you have on your horizon, your certification, Joshua. Cut the time in half. See if you can have it done in 15 days. Oh, you have interruptions? Start. Break it into couple smaller tasks and start. And then report back. Were you able to do it? Did you upgrade your certification? I have a certification upgrade too. Oof, I got to get started. I'm going to give myself till the end of this month to have the certification that I need to get started, that I need to start too. Oof. Anyway, hope this helps. Tune in, good thinkers from all over. Tune in every Monday right here on LinkedIn Live and on YouTube Live, Becky Saltzman. So if you want to subscribe and hit that bell, you'll get notifications. If you're too tired in the morning, if it's early, you can ignore them, but join in later. But tune in right here to Good Thinking, because I love the fact that we have these good thinkers from all over the world who can spend time together improving how we think. Good. Have a great week. Have a great week. Let's see. How do I have a great week?